What's good, everybody? Andrea Rene here. I'm standing with Kind of Funny's Tim Gettys.
Let Tim host.
I love that we got to do this event at the same time.
Me too.
You're just one of my favorite people, Tim.
Thank you very much. You are as well. And I haven't talked to you about video games in quite a long time. And I find that upsetting.
Travesty. So, Tim, Star Wars Outlaws. We're here at the preview event.
Yes.
This was your first time playing it.
It is. I know Greg from our team got to go play the SGF preview. This was my first time. I'm the Star Wars guy, besides Barrett, Kind of Funny, but I'm the Star Wars guy, so I was very, very excited to get my hands on it. We played for a long time, I would say 4 hours or so. 2 missions that were kind of back-to-back, and then a third mission that was a separate thing that apparently was what y'all played at SGF, but extended a bit, right?
Yes. Let's start with your first impressions.
First impressions, this is a very solid Star Wars game. This is a very solid adventure game. This is very solid overall. Very excited for this. It is high on my anticipation list. It was before I played it, and it is just as high after. I don't think it has exceeded my anticipation, though. I feel like this is kind of what I expected this game to be, and that is not a knock against it at all. It's a ton of fun. It is way more Uncharted than what we would normally think of as a Ubisoft game so far, which
that's a great comparison. Yeah,
I appreciate because I enjoy those type of games, but it is definitely way more open than any Uncharted, including Uncharted 4 that did have some fairly open zones. You can already tell that every part and every planet of this is a lot bigger.
We only got to see 2 locations in this particular demo, but when Massive's Julian Garrity got up on stage and talked about how they had 3 words as part of their ethos for creating this game was open world Scoundrel.
Yes.
And open world being the type of gameplay that Massive as a studio has done a ton of work in. I think of this game as a Star Wars open world as something that feels open world, but it's like not so big that you're going to get super lost in it. And I actually really appreciate that because I don't have that much time to really do that much exploring, and I think they kind of really hit the Goldilocks in the middle of that for me.
That's a great way to put it, and I am with you, and I think even more so, I am not an open world guy. I very much like my games point A to point B. Give me the story, give me the gameplay. Let's have some fun, and let's get out. Maybe have some fun collectibles to go back if you want to get the platinum or whatever, but I'm not one of those people that needs a million different things and to get distracted every 5 seconds by something that is kind of when it could have been, oh, here's the gold and here's that everything is actually super high quality. So far what I'm seeing in this is everything seems solid. Like everything that I was distracted to want to go do, every quest that I was given, everyone I talked to felt substantial enough, and it felt like there was a good enough carrot on the stick that I wasn't like, oh, here we go again. Instead I was like, oh, cool. I'm excited to go down this path, and it all kind of feels core to the experience. And in Julian talking about the idea of what this game's going to be, the open world smuggler, they're nailing that. If I could sum this up to a Star Wars fan, and this might be for better or worse for some people, but this is very much Solo, a Star Wars story, the video game. Like, it is very much just a bunch of different characters meeting each other, going on heists, and you are a scoundrel, you are a smuggler. But just like the movie Solo, you're not Han Solo. Like,
right.
You are, but you're not Harrison Ford. It's
it's an impossible standard to live up to, right?
Exactly.
I know exactly what you're getting at. So Vess, the lead protagonist, who is the scoundrel of this story, has a really interesting vibe to her. And I think what I'm curious about once we get our hands on the full game when it comes out, how does her arc develop? Because in a lot of the chatter that we've heard from the dev team about who she is and from the narrative team, they're like, she's this passionate scoundrel who's got a vision and, wants to make a name for herself. But I really didn't get that vibe in the gameplay that we got. She kind of felt a little timid, felt a little unsure of herself, and some of the dialogue choices kind of made me feel like she wasn't as confident as I really wanted her to be.
Interesting. I didn't get that vibe. I liked her as a character. I just feel like it felt a little bit, I've seen this before in a different character. It felt like, okay, yeah, here's another Han Solo. You know what I mean? Which, again, I'm not going to complain. I love that. But I do feel like so far, I'm not getting anything from this that I'm like, oh, this is entirely new and entirely unique. But like, sometimes that's okay. And I'm having good enough time with it so far that I'm excited to see it through. I'm excited to see where the story takes us, because she is from Canto, Bight, which is the casino planet from Last Jedi. And I'm very interested in that as a choice and seeing where they're going to take that for what that means for her character. Obviously, a casino planet kind of means a lot. Imagine growing up in Vegas. You know what I mean? You're going to live a very different life than somebody that grew up somewhere else in America. So
right.
I'm excited to see what that means in a galaxy,
What do you think about the criticisms that have been filtering around online saying it's too much of a Ubisoft formula with an open world? Personally, from my gameplay, I was like, I absolutely see the direct one-to-one comparisons with Far Cry or Assassin's Creed or any number of other Ubisoft titles. But Massive is an open world studio, but it didn't really feel like a cookie cutter Massive game. It really truly felt different to me. And so I think sometimes I get a little bit confused, and I don't know if it's just me being like a fangirl of a lot of these franchises, or maybe I just am not seeing what other people are seeing.
Yeah, there's a nuance to this all, because I feel like, again, I'm not a big open world guy, which means for the most part, I'm not a big Ubisoft guy.
See, that's the difference. That's why I want to know.
But I am a big Star Wars guy, and I feel like I was saying earlier, the carrots on the stick, like the collectibles, the things you're doing, the missions you're getting, feel authentically Star Wars. And that means that it doesn't feel like, oh, it's just checklist stuff. It kind of feels like, oh, this is meaningful, and I understand why this is here. Now, that doesn't mean that it's all the most fun thing in the world. Some of the mini games I played, I was like, okay, like, I'm not loving this, but I didn't outright dislike any of them. And I also don't think that they were too often that I was coming across them. Having said that, there were a couple checkpointing issues I was having where some of the mini games, like unlocking the different doors as you're like splicing things, there's multiple different mini games, which I appreciate because I like the variation there. But there was a couple checkpoints in stealth missions that I lost a couple times because the map wasn't incredibly clear. I didn't know exactly where I was trying to go. And it got kind of frustrating having to redo it over and over, because to get into the door, you had to do one of the splice mini games over and over. And I was like, okay, I get this. And it's not that fun the fifth time. And yes, I get that's on me, get good, but
no, that was my big criticism from the demo that we played at Summer Game Fest, was that splicing game in particular had really poor explanation.
It's Wordle.
It's Wordle.
That's
yes,
the thing.
exactly.
So essentially, there's two different mini games to splice the different types of locks on doors, at least that we experienced. I'm sure there's more in the full game, but one of them is a very simple rhythm game, like a Simon Says type, Parappa the Rappa type thing.
Oh, the lockpicking.
The lockpicking, which I enjoyed. Sometimes I was just like, okay, like I got that, but it didn't register right, whatever. And it can just kind of take long to get to. Minor nitpicks. But then this other one is very much like the game Wordle, where there's a bunch of different glyphs from Star Wars stuff, and in either 3 or 4 or 5 configurations, you need to find the right order in a certain amount, like 6. It's essentially, it is Wordle. It's Wordle. Straight up Wordle. I wonder if there's a better tutorial to get in there, but once I realized, oh, it's Wordle, I was like, oh, this is pretty cool.
A big thing that we got to do in this demo today that wasn't in the previous gameplay was the speeder. What'd you think of the speeder?
Yes, I am torn on the speeder because I love the speeder bike. My favorite thing in Star Wars, besides Luke's green lightsaber. But, one of my favorite things in Star Wars, Return of the Jedi, will always be my favorite Star Wars movie. Not saying it's the best, just saying it's my favorite.
It's great.
And the speeder bike sequence is a huge part of that. So playing video games on a speeder bike it's just always amazing. Whether it was on the Super Nintendo, whether it was on Battlefront in 2017 or whenever that came out, it's always fun. It's fun here too. It definitely is, but it's very slow. Or at least it feels very slow.
I think it's because we don't have any upgrades.
Yes.
And you can only really get 1 or 2 upgrades over the course of the time that we played in the game. And so I also felt like, I was like, man, this thing is really just like handling like garbage. And then I looked in the upgrade tree and I was like, oh, it's something I have to unlock for it to get better and more fluid over time. But like what the steps up that tree are going to be is still like don't know.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting, even the control scheme of using the left and right bumpers to kind of do a like F-Zero style kind of like shift, or even like a Sonic the Hedgehog in modern 3D game style shift. But it lacked the speed of a Sonic the Hedgehog. It's so funny. Actually, Sonic the Hedgehog is a very apt comparison for how the speeder controls. And the lack of momentum that I'm feeling from going, where it's like you're on a speeder bike and things are going by you fast, but it doesn't feel that way. You're not getting that sense of like, oh, wow, we're going here. And one of the optional missions was actually a speeder race. And I did the race, and it felt like we were just kind of doing a power walk through the mall next to each other. And I was like, this is weird. But they were always ahead of me. They beat me. And I was like, okay, that felt a little weird. And then immediately they're like, oh, you can upgrade your speeder. And I was like, okay, it's going to get faster. And then there's going to be more races, and it's going to make a lot more sense. At the end of the day, I'm sounding more negative than I actually am on the speeder.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be great, actually. But when I played, I was a little bit like, okay. Speaking of vehicles, though.
Yes.
The space battles.
Very cool.
Yes, very, very cool. Love the dogfighting. Love the almost Star Fox-esque nature of the kind of linear storytelling bits of it, where it's like you'll dogfight for a bit and then you travel through like a meteor shower thing, and then you like get to this ship and it's a big Imperial ship and you have to like sneak in. It felt authentically Star Wars, and flying in the air and stuff always breaks your brain a little bit, of like, especially in the 3D
I
space,
usually hate it, but I did pretty good here.
And yeah, I think that they came up with a good control scheme that made sense. It felt Star Wars. The music's hitting, the sound effects are right. I'm very much looking forward to seeing this in the final game. The one thing that I was a little bit let down by was the transition from space onto the planet. Like, that's always something we get so hyped about. We see in the trailers and we're like, yeah. Here it's like, oh, this is very slow and a little weird, clearly hiding loading screens. That doesn't bother me. The fun of it, though, when you're actually controlling it, just wasn't there for me.
I was okay with that because this game is trying to do so much already. And if there was going to be a sacrifice in this vision for this game from Massive and what Snowdrop as an engine can do, I'm okay with like the loading between, I mean, as Julian said, it's seamless, and it was seamless. Yeah. But you're right that it wasn't as like magical as it is in some other games. But
that's my problem.
But I was like, it didn't bother me.
They treated it like it was that magical. The music swells, and there's like this big like, oh, we're doing it, and it's like, and I'm like, oh, I am controlling this a little bit, but not fully, just a little bit. And I'm once again like the speeder.
On rails,
I'm
right?
going kind of slow. I'm not mad at the on rails part. I just feel like it's the same criticism as the speeder thing. It's just lacking a sense of magic momentum of like, we are flying right now.
Yeah. Well, that's fair. That's very fair feedback. To kind of end our little chat here, we have to talk about Nix.
We do. Oh my God.
He's such a huge part of the story. Yes. He's Kay's buddy. He's the cutest thing that everyone keeps talking about when we talk about Outlaws. How did you feel about his functioning gameplay?
Oh man, I think Nix is an incredible character, and I love it. And every time he's on screen doing anything, I am here for it. Except for the gameplay. The gameplay stuff, I think really from a control level, hitting the left bumper and then all of his abilities are context sensitive. And I feel the sensitivity between where we're looking and what the context ability is.
I accidentally attacked people that I did not mean to. Totally. That's for sure.
And there's a couple cumbersome things. Maybe this is just me, but there was a couple cumbersome combinations of like, there's some guys with like a jetpack on their back, and you can send Nix out to jump on him and detonate it, which is very useful. Blow up a bunch of enemies around when you're in stealth. It's awesome. But to make that happen, you need to hold the left bumper, angle Nix exactly the right way, hold Y to get the detonate thing, wait till he goes up, and then keep tapping left bumper. And you need to like kind of stay with him in the right position the entire time.
Yeah.
And there's a couple other examples like that too, like throwing a grenade. There's just way too many buttons necessary to do what I feel should be a very simple
like a tap
press.
Right. Yeah.
And yeah, I just feel like the Nix gameplay stuff did not feel fluid, and it kind of felt like it made the controls kind of stop for a second. And it reminded me of playing Metroid Prime, where it's like, back on the GameCube at least, where it's like you need to stop to aim and shoot, and the rest of the game feels so good and fluid.
Maybe they could have solved that with like a lock-on system where you like lock on to the target and then it's like a single button press, so you don't have to like use the camera controls to line it up. So I absolutely understand what you're saying of like, this is a cool idea. The execution is just a little cumbersome in its final form.
Yeah.
But, we don't know. I don't believe this is the final build of the game, though they did just announce that it went gold.
Yeah. And with that, too, you bringing up lock-on, I think that would actually really solve it. And it might be a feature, and I just didn't know. There's a lot of UI. There's a lot of things you can do in the game, and like that's to their credit. I think that there was a lot of options you could see in the menu, a lot of accessibility things. So potentially there is something that'll solve all my qualms with this, because even with the dogfighting, I was having kind of an issue for a bit, and then he was like, oh, you can lock on, and the moment I did that, I was like, oh, we are rocking here. So I do feel like there is a potential for very easy fixes to this stuff that might already be there.
Final question. In the wake of all of the Star Wars games that have already come out, particularly the Jedi series from Respawn, which
I love.
You can't not compare this to, right?
Yeah.
Is Star Wars Outlaws going to be able to hold its own when it comes out, knowing that it's got these kind of giant shoes to fill?
I mean, Jedi Fallen Order was my game of the year 2019. Jedi Survivor I loved last year. What I've played, I put in a similar vein to those games. At the end of the day, though, I prefer linear and I prefer Jedi. So I think I'm always going to lean Jedi, but I hear a lot of people out there don't want lightsabers. They just want to shoot and be scoundrels.
Blasters all day.
This is for them. And it's fun. It's really fun to control. And I feel it's really fun to shoot. It's really fun to move around. I think that there's going to be a lot here. And I keep saying this, but it's an authentic Star Wars experience, top to bottom. And I really love how going from planet to planet, from big landscape into a city, into a cantina, and into space, all feels very seamless, and it doesn't feel at all jilted, at all kind of like, oh, we had to do this and then we had to do that. It feels like a big world that is very lived in, and I appreciate that.
I 100% agree. I think that this is absolutely going to find its own audience, and I love that they're not trying to do too much, that they're making it a really rich but dense experience versus making it a shallow, wide experience. Like that's what I want, particularly as a gamer parent. I'm like, I ain't got 300 hours to go, run across meadows all day long, even though the speeder is fun to drive. Well, Tim, this was such a joy to get to see you.
Always great.
Thanks for chatting with me.
Bring it in, come on.
Watch Tim on Kinda Funny, everybody. YouTube.com/KindaFunnyGames. Twitch.tv/KindaFunnyGames. Do it. Bye.
Bye.